Welcome to the Principles of Good Health podcast, where I provide you with straightforward and practical nutrition and lifestyle advice, helping you lead a happier, healthier, and more active life. I hope you enjoy the show. Well, welcome to my latest edition of Principles of Good Health on my YouTube channel. So thank you for watching this. And I'm recording this in November 2024 because I wanted to bring today some quite alarming figures that have recently been reduced for the UK and life expectancy, which is really quite alarming and of concern. And I just want to go through and read some of these statistics to you and then finish with my thoughts around this with some further statistics of basically why we are in the position that we're in today. I've called this particular video that Britain is eating itself to death. And I took this from the headline, and this is how I found about it, by an article by Ross Clark in The Spectator on the 19th of November 2024. Now, the reason why I wanted to talk about this is that the latest facts and the statistics is that Britain, well, the UK, has the lowest life expectancy in all the Western European countries. We have a lower life expectancy than poorer countries like Greece and Slovenia, and we're only marginally ahead a lot of the more poorer Eastern European countries. So in all the developed nations of Western Europe, Britain sits right at the bottom of about 15 plus countries, I didn't count them, of having the lowest life expectancy for the UK. And it's going down. There was a time our life expectancy was going up, and it's now coming back down again. So with all, you might think about the medical interventions and latest drugs, and yes, certainly some of the life expectancy, some of those people are living, taking a multitude of drugs. But putting that aside for a moment, we need to start analysing why this might be the case. So to give you the statistics is that in the UK, the life expectancy, and I haven't separated this out between men and women, is that the life expectancy is 80.9 years. This compares to 84 years for Spain, 83.8 years for Italy, and 83.1 years for France. So 80.9 is considerably less than countries like Italy, France, and Spain, some of our closest neighbours. Much lower life expectancy, and as I said, lower than countries like Greece and Slovenia. Now, you might start looking at some of the other factors that may contribute to our life expectancy. Smoking, for example. We have considerably reduced our smoking intake in the UK over the last 30 years, 40 years or so. So the number of people who smoke on a daily basis, again, this isn't broken down by whether it's 5, 10, 20 cigarettes a day, but the amount of British adults who smoke in the UK is 12.7%, higher than I thought it might be, compared to Spain with this longer life expectancy, the highest at 84 for the whole of Europe. They smoke 19.8%. Italy, they smoke 19.1%. Greece, I'm sure if you went to a country like Greece, they tend to smoke quite a lot, don't they, when you go to countries like that? Our smoking intake is considerably lower. So it's not to do with smoking that's driving this lower life expectancy. Alcohol intake, I've only got a comparison between a couple of countries, and this really, really surprised me. The amount of alcohol in litres that we consume per year on average is 10 litres. That's much lower than I thought it was going to be. Compared to France, they consume 25.3 litres of alcohol. Yes, I know you could probably look at binge drinking. In France, they don't go down the pub and drink themselves crazy and go out for the night and drink considerable amounts. That's just not the way they do it in France. They'll probably have a glass of wine with a meal, and maybe they drink a glass of wine with a meal most of the year round, but it's a glass of wine. It might be better quality wine. It might be more red wine than perhaps beers and spirits and other things like that, or compared to the binge drinking that we might do where we don't drink all week and then we hit the bars or meet up with friends and just drink ourselves silly. So 10 litres of alcohol per person per year compared to France of 25 litres. And France has this much better life expectancy of 83.1 years compared to the UK of 80.9. So you could say, well, alcohol is not the main driver, smoking is not the main driver. What about our NHS? You know, our NHS, we say the NHS is on its knees. Well, perhaps it's because we're just not funding it enough. Perhaps it's because we have a much fewer doctors compared to some of the other countries. Well, we have a greater spend per capita on our NHS compared to the equivalent in Italy and Spain, much greater spend compared to Italy and Spain. And equally, if we look at the number of doctors that we have compared to Italy and Spain, we have 11.3 doctors, 1,000 people in the UK population. In Italy, it's only 9 per thousand, and in Spain, it's 10.4. So, you know, the amount that we spend on the NHS, the number of doctors we have in comparison, the amount we smoke, all of those factors, we are far more favourable than countries like Spain or Italy. And from an alcohol point of view, far more favourable than Spain. And yet their life expectancy is much, much greater. So we now have to start looking at obesity levels and linking it to the food. I started off by saying that Britain is eating itself to death. You've got to look at our obesity rates. Currently, the obesity rate, and this is when you've got a body mass index greater than 30. I don't think body mass index personally is the best measurement to use. I think a better measurement to use is waist circumference. Our waists are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. You know, we need to start looking at our waist circumference. And really, you know, there is no place for women to have a waist circumference above 30, or for men to have a waist circumference above 38, for example. And probably that should be on the upper end. But the measurement that's done here is looking at a body mass index, a BMI greater than 30, and that counts as obesity. And in the UK, the obesity levels currently is 25.9% of the population. This is adults. A quarter of the UK population has a body mass index of greater than 30, that is putting it into the obese category. One quarter, 25.9% of adults fall into the obese category today. This figure is climbing and climbing and climbing. If you compare the BMI levels in Spain, the obese levels in Spain, it's 14.9%. It's not great. Italy, 12%. Even Germany, where you may feel they haven't got the healthiest of diet with some of their perhaps fattier meat intake, they like a beer. We might think that their BMI levels, obesity levels are much greater. But even Germany, their obesity rate is 16.7%. I mean, all these nations, it's climbing. But UK sits way out ahead of anyone else at 25.9% of the adult population. It's a frightening number of people. And the more obese we are, the more pressure that's putting on metabolic rate, blood pressure, diabetes, cancer risk, heart disease risk. I've run recently a brain health retreat. You know, when you start factoring all these things, and that starts to put more pressure on things like Alzheimer's and diabetes and dementia risk. You know, the biggest killers. There is no doubt that lifestyle obesity levels are a major driver towards the major diseases that we face. And the more obese we are, the bigger the driver it is with these diseases. The greater the diseases, the more pressure it puts on the NHS. We need to spend more money. We need more doctors, but it's having a direct influence on our life expectancy. So when we think beyond just obesity, what is it that we're eating in much greater amounts in the UK compared to our European neighbours? And this is where we start to look at ultra processed foods. I have a video and a blog and a podcast around ultra processed foods that I think I did in 2021, 2022. I think it's a couple of years ago where there was a new NOVA classification looking at what classifies as processed and ultra processed foods. But at the end of the day, these ultra processed foods are the ones that have been heavily processed through the manufacturing processing. So rather than just thinking about I don't know, canned vegetables, which is minimally processed. It's still the vegetable, but it might have some salt added through the canning process. Here we're looking at sort of quite significantly adjusted foods where there's the addition of emulsifiers, sugars, cheap fats, and the food has been modified to a degree that creates this ultra processed. So we're looking at foods like baked goods, sausages, sauces, margarines, composite dishes. These will be ready cooked meals, bread products, chocolate foods, biscuits, breakfast cereals, crisps, ice creams. When we start thinking about the makeup of these goods in our diets today, these ultra processed foods, they form a massive part of our typical daily intake, calorie consumption. You might be alarmed to know that the current view of this is that in the UK, adults derive 44% of their calorie intake from ultra processed foods. I don't count calories, but it's an easy way to do this comparison. 44% of our calorie intake on average for the average adult is coming from ultra processed foods. I've seen some other figures elsewhere on this from reliable sources that said actually it's 57% now, but really alarmingly is that amongst adolescents, the intake of ultra processed foods is 66% in the UK. These are horrifying figures that we can easily change around by cutting back on these types of foods. If we can compare it to other countries of ultra processed foods, you've got Spain at 14.9% of typically their average daily intake is ultra processed. Italy is at 12%. No, 14%. Portugal, I think, is down at about 11%. So, there is no doubt that our massive consumption of ultra processed foods is a massive driver of obesity and is a massive contributor to our early death compared to our European neighbours and putting immense pressure on our NHS. And whilst we may live to 80.9 years, which is reducing compared to where it was, and is quite a bit lower than our closest European Western neighbours, we aren't living healthily. We are actually living quite sickly and taking a lot of medication, and that would be a post for another day. So, yes, we know that ultra-processed foods, obesity, big driver for poor health outcomes with heart disease, type 2 diabetes, and cancer, as I've already said. We need to start taking more personal responsibility. I'm sure you're watching this and you won't be in those massive high numbers of ultra processed food intake, but I think each and every one of us can have a closer look at what we are consuming, thinking about cereal, bread products, sausages, and those other types of hams and meats, cooked goods that we might be buying, crisp intake, ice cream intake, how much of these foods do we consume on a daily basis? And I'm going to really call out some of the manufacturers here around this, because I think it's shocking that they're allowed to get away and sell half the products, probably more than half the products that are on sale in our supermarkets, that are leading to our early death compared to our European neighbours. I want to call out companies like Greggs, Costa, McDonald's, KFC, that are selling these products. And it's all very well that they might sell a salad as as though that's great. There aren't many salads that you can buy in a lot of these places. When I walk into well, I don't go into Greggs actually or McDonald's, but if I've been into somewhere like Costa, and Costa isn't the only one, a lot of these coffee shops, and you look at the food that is for sale, it's all white refined goods. There is nothing that's healthy. It's all cakes, huge muffins. Where's the healthy food that's being sold in these places? We go in there, we grab something to eat. We go into a petrol station, we grab a cheap sandwich or any of these other things like Greggs that you find at petrol stations or on the high street, Subway. We got to call these companies out, but we need to start taking our own personal responsibility at where we can start cutting back. We may be busy people, but there are ways that we should start to try and prioritize our health a little bit. Try and plan a little bit, cook those boiled eggs and take them with you. Cook some extra food at the weekend, put it in the freezer, take something else out and take it with you to lunch the next day. Even if you're buying a soup or you've made a soup, put it in a flask, take it with you. Now it's getting colder. We can all start to make some smaller tweaks and adjustments, and we all need to start taking responsibility because we can all make improvements, I'm absolutely sure. So I wanted to bring that to you today because I think it's alarming. I think we need these wake-up calls and starting to make some little tweaks here and there, start to make little tweaks, start to build up into big differences. And, we want to live healthily. We don't want to just live a longer life, but we also want to live a healthier life. And do check out my other posts. I've got loads of information as to how we can help to make healthier meal choices that can really set you up on your way to making these small tweaks in your diet. So thank you for watching. Do post some comments. I'd love to hear your comments, your thoughts around this. You might be thinking I'm a bit unfair. You may really believe in what I'm saying. You may have some ideas as to how other people can make some tweaks and changes. Let's start sharing. Let's start talking about this because we need to open people's eyes that we are responsible and we are the ones that, we can't blame it all on the food industry. We've got to start opening our eyes and taking some responsibility for what we're doing. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. This is Caroline, the creator of the Peyton Principles Natural Health podcast series. If you've enjoyed today's podcast, please click like and subscribe to the entire podcast series.